There is a specific, suffocating weight that settles on your shoulders when you realize that your new neighbors don't see you as a homeowner, but as an infiltrator, a glitch in their carefully curated reality. And in the pristine, manicured subdivision of Oak Haven, that weight was personified by a woman named Linda, the HOA President, whose smile was as sharp as a razor and just as cold. My name is Marcus, and I am a senior landscape architect who has spent 20 years building a reputation for precision and elegance, a career that allowed me to finally purchase the corner lot house with the wraparound porch that my wife, Sarah, had always dreamed of owning. We were the first black family on the block, a fact that shouldn't have mattered in the 21st century, but clearly mattered a great deal to Linda. The hostility began the very moment the moving truck pulled up. Linda didn't come over with a casserole or a welcome packet. She pulled up in her massive black luxury SUV, lowered her designer sunglasses, and loudly asked my movers if the renters knew the strict HOA rules about commercial vehicles blocking the street. When I stepped out, wiping sweat from my forehead, and introduced myself as the owner, her expression didn't soften. Instead, it tightened into a strained grimace, a look of polite horror, as if she had just smelled something rotting. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I see. Well, just make sure you maintain the standards. We have very high property values to protect here." The implication hung in the air like smog. You are a risk to our investment. For the next 6 months, Linda waged a cold war of microaggressions against my family. She fined me for leaving my garage door open for 15 minutes while I unloaded groceries. She called the police on my teenage son for loitering when he was sitting on our own front steps waiting for the school bus. She constantly sent emails reminding me that music volume must be kept to a minimum, even when we were sitting silently reading on the deck. But her ultimate act of disrespect was physical and blatant. She decided that the corner of my beautifully landscaped lawn, specifically a 20-year-old row of heritage boxwood hedges that defined my property line, was not a boundary, but a convenient shortcut for her SUV because she couldn't be bothered to slow down and turn the wheel properly. It started subtly, tire tracks in the morning dew, a few broken twigs, but soon it escalated into deep, muddy ruts where she plowed through my property daily, shaving 3 seconds off her commute while treating my land like dirt. It was a daily reminder that she felt entitled to my space, that my ownership was theoretical to her while her convenience was absolute. When I finally confronted her at the community pool, where she had already asked to see my key fob 3 times in 1 week, she didn't apologize. She adjusted her silk scarf, looked at me with pure, unadulterated disdain, and said, "Oh, stop whining, Marcus. It's just a little grass. Maybe if you people didn't plant such aggressive bushes right on the street, there wouldn't be an issue. My car is large. I need room to maneuver. If you can't handle the neighborhood traffic flow, maybe this isn't the right place for you." The message was clear and struck me like a physical blow. My convenience matters more than your ownership because you don't really belong here anyway. I tried the civil route first because I am a patient man. I put up reflective markers. She ran them over and left the plastic shards in my yard. I put up a polite, "Please keep off the grass" sign. She ignored it completely. I went to the police, but they called it a civil matter since it was private property and no one was hurt. I went to the HOA board, but since Linda was the president, my complaints vanished into the void. I realized then that kindness, logic, and appeals to common decency wouldn't work on someone who viewed my very presence as an affront to her suburban aesthetic. I needed to speak a language she understood, structure and consequences. As a landscape architect, I understand the physics of hardscaping, and I understand how to build things that last. I pulled the HOA bylaws, reading through pages of restrictive covenants until I found a clause that encouraged homeowners to utilize natural stone hardscaping elements to enhance curb appeal and prevent erosion. I smiled for the first time in weeks. I wasn't going to build a wall, I was going to build a feature. I hired a trusted crew and ordered 3 tons of jagged, unforgiving granite boulders, beautiful, expensive rocks that looked lovely in a rustic garden but were immovable objects to a vehicle. We placed them strategically just behind the hedge line, hidden perfectly within the foliage, exactly where Linda liked to cut the apex of her turn. To be absolutely fair, and to cover my legal bases against any claims of entrapment, I installed a brand new, bright red stop sign that read, "Stop, Property," right at the edge of the grass, warning anyone with eyes that the road ended there and the private property began. I wasn't setting a trap, I was reinforcing my boundary with geology. Saturday morning arrived bright, clear and sunny, the kind of day that emboldens the entitled to move fast. I was sipping coffee on my porch, watching the birds, when I heard the familiar, aggressive roar of Linda's engine speeding down the street. She was running late for her tennis match, her phone was glued to her ear, and she was driving with the arrogance of someone who has never been told no in her entire adult life. She approached my corner doing at least 25. She saw the new red sign, she ignored it. She saw the hedge, she ignored it. She cranked the wheel hard right, expecting soft turf and yielding bushes to give way to her luxury tank. Instead, her front bumper met 3 tons of ancient granite. Crunch, smash. The sound was sickeningly glorious, a loud metallic symphony of shattering expensive plastic, crumpling steel, and hissing steam that echoed through the entire subdivision. The heavy black SUV didn't just hit the rocks, it mounted them. The momentum carried the vehicle upward, snapping the front axle with a loud crack like a gunshot. The wheels splayed out at impossible angles as the chassis grounded itself on the jagged boulders, taking out a section of my wooden picket fence in the process. The airbag deployed with a dusty poof, filling the cabin with white powder. Smoke began to billow from the crushed radiator, hissing as it dripped onto the hot stones. Silence hung over the neighborhood for a heartbeat, and then the screaming started. Linda kicked her door open, which was difficult because the frame was bent, and stumbled out onto my lawn. She wasn't hurt, thanks to modern safety engineering, but her ego was totaled. She was wearing her signature brown blazer and black pants, and when she saw me standing calmly on the porch, her face twisted into a mask of pure, racist fury. "You!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling, manicured finger at me, hysteria taking over her voice. "You did this! You tried to kill me! You put those rocks there! I know it was you!" She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, screaming that a dangerous man had set a booby trap and that she was being attacked by a lunatic neighbor. I just stood there, sipping my coffee, and waited for the law. The police arrived within minutes, lights flashing. The officer, a no-nonsense veteran with grey hair, stepped out and surveyed the scene. The clearly marked road, the bright red stop property sign, the tire tracks leaving the pavement, and the massive SUV perched on top of my lawful landscaping like a monument to stupidity. Linda ran to him, grabbing his arm, playing the victim card she had rehearsed her whole life. "Officer, arrest him. He's a menace. He put those rocks there to destroy my car because he hates me. I fear for my life with these people moving in. Look what he did to my car." The officer looked at the rocks, then at the tire tracks, and finally at Linda. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm and bored. "Did you leave the roadway?" I was making a turn. He knows I drive there. He did this on purpose," she yelled, unknowingly, incriminating herself. "So, you are admitting that you habitually drive off the road and trespass on his private property?" the officer clarified, raising an eyebrow. He turned to me. "Sir, are these rocks permitted?" I walked down the steps and handed him the stamped, approved HOA hardscaping permit I had preemptively filed. "Yes, officer. Just some new landscaping to enhance curb appeal and prevent soil erosion, fully compliant with Bylaw 4.2. As you can see, I also installed a warning sign." The officer turned back to Linda, who was sputtering, her face turning a violent shade of red. "Ma'am, you drove off the road and hit a stationary landscaping feature on private property. That's reckless driving and destruction of property. Here's your citation. You'll need a tow truck, a big one, and you're responsible for the damage to this man's fences and garden." Linda went nuclear. She screamed slurs, she stomped her feet, and she threatened to sue the police department, me, and the granite quarry, until the officer threatened to cuff her for disorderly conduct. Her insurance company denied the claim 3 days later after I sent them the security camera footage of her previous 50 trespasses, citing intentional reckless driving. She was on the hook for $50,000 in car repairs, $5,000 in damages to my property, and the tow bill. But the sweetest victory was the neighborhood meeting the following week, where she was humiliated into resigning as HOA President because the neighbors were tired of paying legal fees for her vendettas. Now, when I sit on my wraparound porch and look at my beautiful rock-fortified corner, I don't just see a garden, I see a monument to the day Linda learned that my black skin didn't make my property rights any less real than hers, and that sometimes the hardest lessons in life are made of solid granite.